All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're unpacking some truly massive financial stakes by looking at a fascinating piece of analysis from author and CPA Brian. He outlines a scenario he calls the $11 trillion debt trap. Okay, let's dive into this staggering number, $11 trillion. So, moving right into part one, the $11 trillion cliff and the looming auction. Brian makes a really distinct point here. While he notes that the government wants the public to believe the deficit is totally under control, his analysis points to a trap that is anything but transitory. He doesn't frame this as some temporary glitch we'll just bounce back from. Instead, he argues it's a structural cliff that demands our immediate attention. Next up is part two, the refinance math explained. Let's break down those trillions. And this brilliantly illustrates his math. Out of that $11 trillion total, a massive $9 trillion is required simply to roll over or refinance old debt. It's essentially like paying off an old credit card by maxing out a brand new credit card. The remaining $2 trillion, that's what he explicitly labels as new overspending. So the vast majority of this staggering auction is quite literally just the cost of maintaining the debt we already have. Which brings us to a huge tipping point identified in his analysis, $1 trillion plus. According to Brian, the math for the US Treasury simply stops working once the government is forced to pay over $1 trillion purely in interest. Just wrap your head around that scale for a second. When the cost to simply service the debt eclipses that threshold, the author argues we enter a deeply, deeply unsustainable trap. Moving on to part three, the interest rate trap and the ripple effect. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the core mechanism Brian warns about. He calls it a negative feedback loop, and it could impact every single American household. You see, when the sheer volume of government borrowing puts pressure on the system, interest rates are driven upward to attract buyers. And that upward pressure, it directly penalizes everyday household borrowers. Let's walk through the exact chain reaction the author outlines to see how this plays out in the real world. Step 1. The US Treasury desperately needs buyers for this enormous $11 trillion auction. Step 2, because the risk and the volume are just so high, investors demand higher interest rates to actually take on that debt. And step 3, that higher rate doesn't exist in a vacuum. It bleeds straight into the broader economy, causing consumer, mortgage, and car loan rates to absolutely skyrocket. He draws an unbroken line from the abstract bond market straight to the very relatable, everyday cost of buying a house or a car. Finally, part 4, protecting your savings and the author's warning. Here, Ryan presents us with a pretty stark dichotomy. On one side, he asserts that the government simply cannot afford a recession. It's politically and economically untenable. So because of that, he argues their only alternative survival mechanism is going to be forced mass money printing. In his view, to escape the immediate pain of a debt default or a severe recession, the system will inevitably choose to just flood the economy with newly printed money. And he cautions us very directly here. He says, don't be fooled by what he calls economic theater. According to his analysis, the very real consequence of all this forced money printing is that it actively devalues your hard-earned savings. His argument basically suggests that the ultimate solution to the government's debt trap turns into a silent penalty on the individual saver. To wrap up his argument, the author offers a really specific call to action for his audience. Because he firmly believes this massive devaluation is right on the horizon, Brian urges individuals to build and protect what he calls their personal fortress. And his recommended step to stay ahead of this crisis? Subscribing to his newsletter, which is fittingly titled Hidden Tax. So we'll leave you today with this provocative question drawn straight from his analysis. It really is the ultimate unknown in this massive macroeconomic equation. The government absolutely relies on selling these bonds, but as CPA Brian asked us to consider, if interest rates stay high and the math stops working, and those buyers stop showing up for this $11 trillion auction, who really pays the price? It's a question that certainly leaves us looking at the global economy and our own savings accounts in a completely different light.